Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in again. So we are going to move along with the bike build. I was able to get the wheels back from powder coating, so they're good to go. So the next step is we are going to change out the suspension on this bike, both front and rear. The reason for this is I think performance oriented. The suspension is probably the foundation of any bike, right? If you don't have good suspension, typically you face, different types of scenarios, whether it be on the road or the highway, going through canyons, track days, whatnot. So, first and foremost, I always try to change out the suspension, whether it be on the trucks, the cars, or the bikes. The particular suspension on the STs are very soft up front. I've noticed upon braking, the nose dives really bad on this bike, which I don't like. It's not that responsive. And the rear is okay. It's, soft, but I want to firm it up. I'm also going to raise up the bike as well. So we are going to go with +2 up front on the bike, and then we're doing 13.5 on the rear. So it's going to be quite significantly different compared to a stock setup and from your typical, say, Öhlins or Legend suspension, which are good. But I actually chose to go a different route. On my Street Bob, I do have Öhlins on it. Both front cartridges are Öhlins, and then the rear I went with the Öhlins shock as well. And I've noticed that the ride is good, but for what I'm using it for, I think it could do a little bit better. So that bike is more dedicated for just around town street use. I have taken it a long distance through switchbacks, and it does perform well. But being that it has a 21-inch front wheel and an 18 in the rear, I find that the larger wheel up front is not good for like high speeds and doing canyon runs. So on the ST, I'm keeping the stock wheel sizes as is. So we're doing the 19 up front and then the 16 in the rear. So that's going to be stock. And then I went with the Cruise Tech, Metzler Cruise Tech spec tire, which I've read are phenomenal. I wish I actually went on the Street Bob with those, but from what I'm hearing, the Cruise Techs are phenomenal on dry and they grip really good, so I'm excited about that. And yeah, so we're going to tackle the basically walkthrough of the suspension, which I'll get to here in a minute. You may or may not know which suspension I'm going with. I'll go over kind of the tools, the specialty tools that we'll need to get the cartridges exchanged and switched out from the stock forks and bodies. Kind of the processes, what that entails, because I've spoken with GP suspension directly, and it's pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, I've done the cartridges on the 49 millimeters, which are not inverted, so they're a little bit easier. The inverted forks, there's a little bit different process compared to just a traditional fork, so kind of walk you guys through that and go through the whole process of getting that, filling the oil, making sure the measurements, adjusting rebound and compression and whatnot. So let me pause here for a second. I'll jump back and we'll kind of go over what suspension I went with and then the tools, and then we'll start tearing the bike, the front end first, and then we'll go to the rear, because the rear is pretty straightforward, 2 bolts. That shouldn't take long, but the front of the bike is going to be a little bit more intricate. So yeah, looking forward to this one. GP suspension, that's what I went with. Heard really good things about the suspension. They're a proven company. They're not as popular as some of the bigger players. Your Fox, your Öhlins, your Legends, some of the other guys out in the industry, but Have really good feedback from some of my friends that run them. I thought I'd give them a try. You know, the main difference with GP, for example, compared to the Oleans, I think they're more custom tunable for your specific application. So when you go on their site, it actually asks for, you know, your rider weight, what kind of riding you do, you know, if you ride 2 up, how much percentage you ride 2 up. So they kind of configure and build the suspension to your specifications, which I really like. Their customer service is great. Jack over at GP Suspension and the technical folks there, you know, they answered all my questions. They're really supportive. So, you know, I've called there a few times and asked some specific questions, and they can get back to me really quick. So I like that. The other factor I went with this is, as I mentioned, I went with the +2 front just to lift the bike a little bit higher because of the lean angle, right? I think for more aggressive riding in canyons and what I do, I think the +2 is going to be a game changer. Obviously, it's going to sit a lot higher than your factory bike, but for, you know, twists and turns and leaning the bike, I think it's a solid choice. So GP actually builds the +2, so you can choose from a +1 or a +2, and it's built into the cartridge already, right? So I like the fact that you don't have to run spacers like your Oleans. So everything is already built in. There's no spacers that you need to add. There's no other modifications that you need to do to the cartridges. It's just a kind of a plug and play, right? And also the good thing is that the fork legs, you can run stock length legs, so you don't have to do like a +2 as you would on an Oleans. You can utilize your factory fork legs for that. So that's another plus, right? So you don't have to purchase additional fork legs if you want to run a +1 or +2. So they've done all the research and the development and feedback from riders and calculations, and there's enough room for the shock to move up and down correctly with the stock fork legs, which I really like. So that was another reason I chose to go with the GP. Obviously, you have your spring rate that's custom made for you and your weight. And then I also went with the 13.5. I would call it a coilover rear with a remote reservoir. So they recommend not exceeding a 13.5 spec, and that's actually spec'd out for the +2 front end. You can go with a taller shock that they make. I think it goes up to 14, but then you have to modify the swing arm, which I don't want to do. So I just went with their standard configuration, which is 13 inches up to 13.5. So really excited about this one. I hear good things about the rear suspension, so looking forward to that one. And then the other thing I went with was the fork tubes. I'm swapping out the fork tubes, so I'm going with the gold fork tubes. These are from Original Moto Garage, and obviously there's an added expense when you're swapping them out, but I didn't want to use the chrome ones since I'm kind of going with the black and gold white theme, so I'm swapping out the fork legs on that. So there's a couple different processes that you need to take to remove the foot off the fork tube and then get that all swapped out. So yeah, so this is kind of the whole package for the front, the cartridges, and then the rear as well. Moving forward to the specialty tools. So a couple things that you definitely need. You need the cartridge tool, right, to torque that down once the cartridge is in the fork leg itself. I purchased this to hold the the body of the shock in my vise. I've used this on my 49 millimeter and they work good. Hopefully it's going to work the same on the inverted, so this way I can put the whole shock assembly in my vise and then clamp this down to basically, you know, torque anything or remove it. So I'm looking forward to using that. You'll need a seal driver tool, which is a 43 millimeter. I just purchased this off Amazon. This you'll need as well to take off the fork tube from the foot. It's a clamp or clamshell clamp that they use to basically go over the tube, and then that's removable. GP also provides the additional tools that you'll need. I think this is a 17 and a 19, and this is your pull-up tool for the cartridge. Basically, you'll need that to kind of torque everything down. This is the top cap specifically designed for this particular cartridge. So these three they sell as a package on their site. And then for the seals, I actually read a little bit, and then I bought the whole kit from Tucker Speed, so they were really good. I purchased the whole kit while they had the promotion running, so I got a little bit discount on the package itself. Going with a dual compound fork seal kit. These guys are made in Italy. From what I've read, it's a really good seal, so we'll use that. And then this 6 millimeter Allen, this is to take off the Allen off your compression side and drain the oil. So we got one of those. And then we have a 19 millimeter for the factory top caps to pull those off and drain the oil from the top, so we'll utilize those. And then I think lastly we have the brake line extension. So since the bike has ABS, it comes with the block and then 21-inch front brake lines, and this was purchased from Kraus, and comes with two brake lines, so we'll swap those out, because if you're running the +2 you can't run your factory brake line, so that's another thing to consider. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to going over the the process of this. Obviously it's gonna a little bit time consuming, but I think it's pretty straightforward from the YouTube videos I've seen out there. I think if you're a kind of a do-it-yourselfer and know the process and kind of can read instructions, which GP does provide the instructions, I just need to download those. I'll get you through getting them swapped out. So yeah, definitely looking forward to getting the new suspension on it. I think that's kind of the last puzzle for now. Since I got the wheels back, got the tires on, I'm still waiting for some hardware for the rotors. I did upgrade the rotors. I'll go over that on another video. But to get the bike up and running, I just need to tackle the suspension, and then we'll hopefully get it on the ground here shortly. So, all right, so we're ready to remove the. We're going to start with the right side, the rebound side. So we're going to remove the fork out of the triple tree. We're going to use a T40 bits tool. So I'll start by doing that first. Just make sure that once you start loosening the pinch bolts, that the fork doesn't drop out of the trees here. So I'm going to hold one side of it with my hand while I'm loosening the pinch bolt. Alright, so we got that one out of the way. Alright, so next we're going to remove, so first off, I got the shock in the vice clamp itself. I'm supporting the bottom end of this because we got to take the shock cap off, and then that releases the cartridge, so we want to make sure this bottoms out, because if it does, you got oil holes in the fork tube that could potentially come out, and you got oil all over the place. So just have a little support system underneath here. We're going to use a 19 millimeter on the top to crack open this. Hopefully this clamp I got from Amazon holds this, so I can at least get this off. So let's check. Oh, put some gloves on real quick. So you don't have to worry, this is not under pressure. The cartridges are, they have their own nitrogen in there, but these are not under pressure, so you don't have anything to worry about exploding on you. But they might have a tendency to pop up because it's under pressure with the spring. Just be mindful of that. Okay, so that is up and out. Let me just support this here real quick. So now we got to take off the cap and release it from this nut, which is a 17 millimeter. And this is a part you need to be careful that the tube does not drop out from underneath you, because then you're going to get oil everywhere. So now we're going to remove the shock out of the clamp and dump the oil out. I just have a pan here underneath. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. So we have it draining here, just in the pan, making sure all the oil comes out of it. Let's wait a few minutes here. Alright, so next we're going to, after you dump out all the oil, we're going to put this back in the vise, but we're going to actually bolt it up to the foot. One thing you want to be cautious of is this portion of it where the caliper hangs off needs to go in the vise, so make sure you have plastic or non-marring type vices, because you need to pinch this together. What I've read online is if you can take like maybe an exhaust washer or a standoff washer and put it into the caliper bracket here, you have some width to play with here, right? So you're not necessarily pinching the vise on the painted portion, but on the spacer itself. That way you don't mar this up. So we're going to put this in the vise. Just make sure it's kind of snug in there, right? So it doesn't fall over. So next we are going to remove the dust cap. We want to make sure we don't mess this up, so because we're going to reuse this dust seal as well. So I just use like an O-ring remover tool to kind of pry it off first, and it should pop off after that. And also, this is all, since these are inverted shocks, you're working kind of upside down, right? So it's a little bit tricky to, work on it. Obviously, if you're reusing the stock fork tubes, be mindful not to scratch the tubes, right? When picking out some of the spring retainers in here. So now this should actually just pop up. See, and here's the hole I was talking about. I don't know if you guys can see it here. This is important that the shock does not travel past this, right? Because that way you might have an issue with it leaking out if you don't dispose of the oil first by turning the fork upside down and releasing that. So now we're just going to pull this off. Obviously make sure it has a rag. And I think a good thing at this point is to heat this section up a little bit. That's what some of the guys do. So I'm going to heat this up with a torch, because we're actually going to use a torch as well for removing the foot. Just got this guy. Comes out nice. So tubes out, oil's out, no really leaks, which is good. That's what I wanted. We will set this fork leg on the side to drip out the rest of the oil. So now we want to remove, there's a retainer here, so this needs to pop off. And this is going to be reused, so the retainer is reused. This one's reused. This is the seal that I purchased. This will not be reused, but everything else will be reused. And you just want to make sure once you take this stuff off that you put it back in the same order. So once I take it off, I'll kind of stack this just to make sure I know how this goes back together, so we're not confused, as sometimes I am. And I think too, one thing to be wary of too is, some of these things, since this bike only has 2,000 miles on it, if you had a higher mileage bike, you might want to consider replacing this stuff, like a rebuild kit. So this is all nice and stacked together. We'll set this aside. Put this over here. Okay, so I have to adjust the camera a little bit. So next we're actually going to pop this castle nut off, which is here. There is a tool through gyms you can order. I think it's like 119 bucks. Everybody seems to be out of it, but GP says that you can remove it with a punch, right? So we'll just kind of hammer it off. It's not going to be reused. If you are using your existing tubes, the castle nut will not be reused. One thing also to consider is, I'm just going to show the process of removing this, but from what I've been told, since I'm replacing my tubes essentially, right, I would just need to actually remove the tube from the lower foot without having to take the castle nut off, since this basically is just going to pull out completely. But I wanted to just review that for the folks that are reusing the tubes, how to take off the castle nut if you do not have this particular, if you don't have the particular castle nut tool in place. So I'm actually going to switch out, because I've noticed that these non-marring vise adapters are kind of sliding around, so I'm just going to actually put some aluminum ones that I have. It shouldn't have any issue with marring the caliper bracket, and I think I'm going to get a little bit better hold on that to pull this off. So let me grab a step stool real quick, because I'm not tall enough and I don't have a lower vise to put the fork in. Again, we want to heat this up a little bit before we take it off, because this is all like Loctited, so just be cautious of that. Again, if you're not reusing this castle nut, right? So and just a little heat on that, right? You don't need a lot of heat. All right, so I think I see it coming off, which is good. Yeah, it is. Thank God. So it just takes a little finesse. Put some different gloves on, see if I can unscrew it. So it is doable without the castle nut tool. Again, like I said, you don't have to reuse that, so screwing it up won't matter. Just make sure that you heat this up before you do it. So once you get this castle nut off, this should come all off. And the spring is underneath this castle nut, so just be cautious. I mentioned to you before that I thought taking the cap off was going to bump the spring out, but it's actually sitting underneath the castle nut. So just be cautious of that. Once you take the castle nut off, it's underneath that. The spring is underneath that castle nut. The left side, the compression side, doesn't have a castle nut, so you don't have to worry about taking that off. It's only the rebound side. I can feel it. You know, the spring pressure on here. All right, so there we go. Itty bitty spring. And I'm just gonna see if there's any residual oil in here. Get your spacer. Just basically goes like that. Let me just just double check, because next step is we're going to take the foot off. Yeah, not too much oil in there. All right, so we got the spring out, spacer stacked in the top end. Put this aside here. So like I said, it is doable to take off the capsule nut without the specialty tool from gyms. I mean, it took me maybe 5 minutes. Just make sure you heat this section up here to remove it, since it's Loctite. You know, save yourself $100 on a tool, right? So the next one is we're going to take off the tube from the foot. So we're going to heat this section up here of the foot. This is actually needed. This is the forgot what they call this this particular clamp, but it is necessary to take off the tube from the foot. So we're going to put this up on the top. Obviously, you want to make sure that the clamp is on the top portion of it, and avoid clamping it anywhere in the lower section where the tube travels in and out of the body, because you want to avoid scratching it or marring it up. So the top section is the best way to do that. So let me just clamp this down real quick, and then we can attempt to remove the foot. That's just a 3/4 inch, it's 1/2 inch. So you need a 1/2 inch breaker bar. Okay. All right, so let's heat this bottom portion out. Again, not a lot of heat, because you don't want to damage the finish on it, but it does require, you know, heat to loosen up the Loctite in there. Obviously the top portion where the threads are, that's where you want to heat it up. Alright, let's see if that's enough. Mark this to see if it's turning. Nope, it's the top clamp turning. Alright, that actually took a lot more effort than I thought it would. I was having trouble getting this to break free, but I had to add, you know, a little bit more heat on this. I was just worried about, you know, the finish getting compromised, but I just put enough heat on it that I could break the tube away. So we are just taking the last portion of the tube out of the foot. It's just a lot of Loctite on this. I don't know why they put so much damn Loctite on here. I mean, you can see the Loctite on it. Look at all that. Just caked in there. Unbelievable. So, again, if you're reusing these factory tubes, you're going to clean and make sure all this is gone. You know, it's going to take a little elbow grease to take it all off, but this needs to be perfectly cleaned out before reassembling the tube back in the foot. Luckily, since I'm not utilizing the factory tubes, since I'm doing +2, or sorry, not +2, I am doing +2, but I'm doing gold fork tubes. I'm not going to be utilizing that, so I just need to clean out the inside of the foot itself. One important step is there's a O-ring and a washer on the bottom of this, so we want to make sure we pull that out carefully and not damage it, because the O-ring is going to be reused again. So now that we have the cartridge set in place on the foot, obviously this is going to be standing here. We're going to take the cartridge torque tool and slide it over the cartridge from the top, and you'll see why in a moment. Just make sure it's, you know, centered nicely in these grooves. And then we're going to take the fork tube. Now, one thing I noticed, and you want to make sure, is obviously if you're not changing out the fork tubes, you know which one is left and right, but the rebound side, which is the right side of the bike, is shorter than the left side tube. So if you do happen to purchase different tubes, you just want to be cautious of that you put the right tube in on the right side. So the shorter tube does go on the right side, and the longer tube, the compression side, goes on the left side. Okay, so we're ready to put the fork tube back into the foot. We have the cartridge set in the foot, the O-ring set. I double checked that. The washer that came out of your old fork tube, you are not going to reuse, because the bottom of this cartridge, as I mentioned before, has that washer built into it. So you want to make sure that doesn't get reused, because it's going to change the height of the cartridge if you do put that in. So just make sure that's not used. You're just reusing the O-ring. One thing I did notice is there is a earlier version of this tool, the cartridge tool, that does not have these what do you call it? I guess notches built into it. That you slide this over the cartridge first and then put the tube over. Since it does have the notches, it's actually too much of a width for the tube to slide over. So we're going to put this tube on first and then the cartridge tool in second. So the next step after you have this is we're going to put some assembly lube around the lip of the fork tube, just to make sure it slides down past the O-ring that's in there, and then we're going to red Loctite the threads on that. So we'll slide this over. And now we can put the cartridge tool in. Just be sure that it kind of falls in the grooves. It should drop. There it goes. Okay, so that's set. We're gonna slowly start threading the tube down into the foot. And one thing, basically, since that bottom of the cartridge has that washer built into it, the foot, or excuse me, not the foot, but the fork tube is going to be basically clamping that down, as I showed you previously in the steps. That back out, bottoming out washer that's built in, you're basically making sure that you're threading both the fork tube and the cartridge at the same time, right? Because it has threads on the end. But the tube you're going to thread in first, and basically make sure it bottoms out. So it's a little bit important step too. Okay, so that's bottomed out. The tube is bottomed out, so we're going to back off the tube a little bit and spin the cartridge to make sure that it's centered down there, right? See, if I tighten the tube, then the cartridge doesn't tube, so we just want to make sure that the cartridge itself is also tightened at the same time. And that's, I think, centered. So now the next step is to tighten or torque down the tube itself. So we're going to grab our clamp. Again, make sure that the clamp is on the top portion of the tube so you don't mar any of the fork tube, right? Alright, so I'm going to get my torque wrench. We're going to tighten down the tube, and then we're going to torque down the cartridge, because that's also torqued down. Remember that back out washer needs to be torqued down too. So let's torque down the tube first, and then the cartridge. Alright, so I was trying to find out what the torque spec is on the tube, and I can't find it in the service manual or anywhere, so I think I'm just gonna maybe do 20-25 foot-pounds. Hopefully that's enough. I think it will be, but I couldn't find anywhere what the actual spec is on it. I don't think it's going to be more than that, so and then we're gonna do the top of this as well. I think I'm gonna do 15 foot-pounds on the cartridge, because I don't think we need much on that screw. Okay, so that is done. We can remove the tube clamp. Okay, that looks all good. So we got the tube torqued down to the foot. We got the cartridge torqued down inside. Everything's looking good. All right, so we're back. Have to do a little double checking. So next specialty tool is our bag. And the reason we're using the just a regular bag is we're gonna put this over this whole assembly to make sure that we don't mess up any of the seals that go over this, because obviously these edges are super sharp, right? And if we don't have any kind of like easy way of putting the seals over it, you have the tendency of scratching that. So as we start to put this back together, we just want to make sure that everything is going in the right direction, right? Because this is all going up. So just make sure you're orienting all your seals and tubes, your seals and dust tubes correctly, or dust seals. So first, we're going to put the dust seal on first. That towards the bottom. I actually might cut this a little bit because it might be a little bit too big. Getting some drag on it. Let's see if that helps. Next is going to go our clip. And then I'm using the SKF not dust seal, but fork seal, dual fork seal. I got these from Tucker Speed. So you just want to make sure this is oriented in the right direction. Orange portion of this goes facing up towards the oil. It does come with a dust cap. If you do not want to use the original, you can utilize theirs. That's an option, so it does come with that, but mine's good, and I'm going to keep that black on there. Just make sure this is all nice and lubed up. That's on there. Next is going to be the washer. Again, just make sure it's all clean so you're not contaminating anything on that. And then I forgot what this is called, a band or something. Put this on next. Band that goes on top. So now we can remove the plastic off here. Shows us clean. Okay, so next we're ready to put the shock body on. Let me put on the driver first. is going to be your seal driver. It's going to go above the seal. So this is going to sit like this. So now next is we're going to drive all this up into the all the seals and the washer and stuff. We're going to drive all this up into the shock body, and then we can start closing all this together. Put some assembly lube in here just to make sure everything sits nice and goes in good. Alright, so I think we're good, ready to assemble this. Next we're going to put the clip in. And then the dust cover. All right, so we have the cartridge installed. Everything is ready to go. It's time to put the fork oil in. GP calls for modal 5W weight. So this is what I'm going to go with. Tucker Speed also recommends this oil weight because GP suspension recommends it. So I'm just going to go with this one. There's obviously other ones you could use, but from what their testing has done and showed, the modal is a good weight. I've used this in my car actually for the oil, the engine oil. It's a really good oil. Really good feedback and reviews on it, so we're going to go with this. And then we also have our fork oil set height tool. So this calls for 160 millimeters of oil, and that's measured from the top of the bolt down. So basically this tool is set on the top, and then we're going to siphon the oil until it doesn't siphon anymore out. So we're going to start, I believe, with 10 ounces of oil and then go from there. Bleeding the cartridge and moving it up and down to bleed all the air out of it, right? And then we'll put in the preload spacer in as well after we set that, just to make sure everything's good to go. So let's move forward with putting the oil in. So we're going to work the cartridge up and down to get all the air out of it. And once it starts getting all the air out of the cartridge, you'll start getting some more resistance on it. And this should probably continue for, at least a couple minutes, just to make sure you got all the air purged out of the cartridge. So it is getting a little bit more resistance on that, which is good. Put some more in here. Just want to work the body and the cartridge, trying to get all the air out. See how nicely that's coming down, so it looks like we're getting to the point where we can put the preload spacer in. And I think I put in a little bit too much oil. So let's set the height now. And again, it's from the top of the cartridge bolt down. And it is critical to set this correctly, because if you don't, it's not going to perform like it's supposed to. As you can hear it, right? That's coming to the end of the top. or to the bottom of this 160 milliliter where I set it, so you can hear the air sucking in. There's no more fluid being pulled out, so that's going to be where our end point is for the height. And like I mentioned before, I did overfill it a little bit, so this is just enough out of there. And this is just with the preloaded cartridge in, not the spring. So the next step is going to be to adding the spring into the body and start closing the shock up. Yeah, there's some numbers in here. So I don't know if you can see that. It's 50, I think. So that's going to be facing up. So if you happen to need to take off the cap for any reason, you know which spring you have in there. I just want to see if they're the same height. Yeah, they're the same height. All right, so this goes in next, adjustment rod. And then we're gonna put on our pull-up tool. There's two different thread sizes on here. Just wanna make sure you have the right one. All right, so we're gonna put the spring in over this body. Again, make sure that the numbers are sticking up. And then we're gonna put the, I think this is called the spring retainer, flat side pointed down, because the groove side is gonna be up into the shock cap. We're gonna put on our GP, there's a 19 side and I believe a 17 millimeter side, so we're gonna put this within the shock here, that we can basically capture all of it. So that's clipped in there. Basically, this kind of acts like a clamp. This way you can thread on the shock cap as well. So now we can remove the pull-up tool since this is in place. Make sure you got your adjuster pin in there. And now we're going to screw on the top cap. I'm going to put some assembly lube on this O-ring just to make sure it doesn't go on dry. Okay, and we're gonna use a 14mm wrench on top and just twist this down and screw on the cap onto the threads. And I think this is just, you know, not super tight, but just tight enough. All right, so we got the tool out. Now we can start assembling the body up towards the cap. And then from here we can tighten the cap with the tool. Some people put them in the triple trees and then tighten them that way, torque them down. I'm going to try to just tighten them in these vise I have. If not, then I'll put them inside the bike and do it on the triple tree. But yeah, this is pretty much done. We got everything together. Caps on. Everything's looking good. So this is 13 foot-pounds. So the top cap is 14 foot-pounds, which I have a wrench here. I'll probably just double check the torque spec once I put the shock back in the trees. Okay, so since I have the shock body here, it's probably the easiest to just let me actually move this back. Do the adjustment for the rebound and preload. So rebound, we're going to set the brass Allen key all the way down. So we're going to actually go all the way in until it seats at the bottom, and then 13 clicks out for the rebound. That's going to be your base setting. And then for the preload, we're going to back it out counterclockwise, which is going to give you, there's a full range of 12 millimeters. So you're going to back it out all the way, and then you're going to use a 14 millimeter wrench and go 6 revolutions back clockwise to get you the base setting at 6 millimeters. So that's going to be your base setting on the shock, and basically you can fine tune from there, but that's where GP recommends you start and then adjust accordingly. Just wanted to quickly show you guys a comparison of the length on the plus 2s compared to factory. It gives you kind of an idea how much longer the plus 2s are than factory. So it will definitely sit a bit higher. Just wanted to catch that before I take off the other side. All right, so I got the left side of the shock mounted up on the vise. There's a little bit different process on this one. So we're gonna crack open this top cap, and then on this one we actually drain the oil from the bottom of it. So we're gonna release this. That way once we crack the bottom, it doesn't just spray everywhere. We can kind of control the volume it comes out from the top of the cap. So let's crack this, get the 19 mil on top here. bumper bar. Make sure it doesn't drop out, so we're going to hold this, but we're just going to crack that and then put it back on a couple turns. And then we have a 6mm Allen key. So just make sure it doesn't drain everywhere. Not too bad. Again, obviously I think we have to be mindful of this not dropping all the way out, because then it's going to start bleeding everywhere. Back in the vise, clean this up a little bit, pull off the dust cap. Again, you can replace this stuff if you got a lot more miles, but since a bike that I bought is fairly new, I'm not gonna spend extra money to do this since this stuff's good still. Now we're just going to yank this up, sledgehammer it up, and get it off the tube. Set this aside and let it drain. Alright, so we got the guts of it out. We're going to heat this guy up again and remove the tube, clean it out, and then start reassembling the shock. Alright, so we're back. We're doing the left side now. I pulled off the old stock tube from the foot. I tell you what, man, this one was probably the worst yet. It took extra heat on here, a little finagling to get it free. I had to use penetrating oil to get into the threads. It just wouldn't loosen up. After struggling it for 40 minutes, I decided, I'll sleep on it, come back in the morning. and try to tackle it, and I was able to get everything basically removed and ready to start the new process. So if you're not replacing the fork tubes, you can leave in the stock tube itself and just pull the guts out. You don't need to remove it and pull the washer out, because you're going to actually utilize the washer that was already in there along with the O-ring. So since I'm putting new tubes in, I just pulled everything out, cleaned it, put the washer back in there and the O-ring, and then the same process, right? Just oil the outside of the lip on the tube if you're going to replace them, and then put some red Loctite. The compression side does not have the washer, so you don't have to put in the cartridge in first and then the tube like I did on the rebound side. So first we're just going to put the tube in, and then we're just going to actually torque it down right away. Yeah, it's unbelievable how much Loctite they used on this one. Okay, so that's down. Now we're going to put on my clamp here to tighten the top. I mean, it bottoms out basically, so you can't really, I guess, over torque it, but just be mindful of it, right? Take this off. I'll pull the cartridge over here so you guys take a look. So this is the cartridge on the compression side. So it doesn't have the washer like the old one did. You just utilize the old bolt that pulls out from the bottom of the foot, and then we'll red Loctite that in. One thing I did notice, it didn't come with a crush washer, copper washer, for some reason, the kit. So I don't know if that, maybe they forgot it, but I had to run to Home Depot. So when you get your kit, just take a look and see if there's a washer. If not, then you'll have to go purchase one. Let me just get a little organized here. And again, the orange side goes up on this specific seal, the SKF. Spring side down. Washers next. right, so everything looks good here. We can heat this up a little bit just to make it going easier. Got the seal driver in place. Let you put some. Oil around here. All right, so we got the body on. Now we're going to put the cartridge back in since I prematurely added that in before. Right, so next step we're going to put the bolt on and the cartridge. I'll drop the cartridge in here. Cartridge tool. There it goes, it dropped. I'm gonna put some red Loctite on here. It doesn't call for it, but just a little on there in case I need to remove it at some point again. Okay. And I'm just doing this to 15 foot-pounds. I think that's going to be plenty. This can come out, twists and pulls up, so that's what we want. Next we're going to put on our preload spacer. And I think I did this without the preload spacer before, but you can do it either or. Just make sure when you start to level out your oil that the preload spacer is in there when you pull the 160 milliliters. Get up on my tool here. Okay, so we got the oil height adjusted correctly at 160 milliliters. I'm going to put in our adjuster rod. And we're going to put our spring on. Yep, forgot. We need our pull-up tool. Okay. It's a pain in the ass. All right, so pulled up the cartridge, put the retainer on there, and now we can pull up the pull-up rod off. And now we're ready to put the cap on. I'm going to use that 14 milliliter to tighten it down. And we're going to put a little assembly lube on that O-ring on top, just to make sure we have some lubrication on that. All right, so we're ready to put this body up at the cap. And that's it. This side I think is a little bit easier because you don't have to pull off the tube to put in the washer on the rebound side. So the comp side is obviously easier if you don't need to swap out the fork tubes and just use your factory tubes. So that's a plus. We're gonna go ahead and set the rebound and preload. So I'll drop this down, do as I did on the other one, 13 clicks out on the rebound, and then we're gonna do 6 revolutions on the preload. And that should be it. We should be ready to go back in. So yeah, the front's gonna be done. Here in a second, I will video also the rear because I'm going to put the rear shock in, so I'll go over that process. But this is going to do it for the front end on the suspension. So let me know what you guys think, how the install went, if it's something that you guys would tackle as a do-it-yourself. I think from a mechanical standpoint, I think the only real challenge is removing the tubes from the foot, because obviously the Harley uses a lot of Loctite in the factory, so that's, you know, something that I ran into. The second would be the specialty tools. I think all said and done, it was a little bit around $340, $350 for the tools, so it's not cheap if you want to do it yourself. Obviously, I think the shop might charge you a little bit more just because of their time to get everything swapped out, so just be cautious of that if you do decide to do it yourself. I do feel that if you're mechanically inclined, the front forks are something you could definitely do on your own at home. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Give me some feedback, tips and tricks if you guys done this before on GP or any other suspension for that matter. I'd like to hear what you guys' thought is on that. If you haven't checked out my other videos, take a look at those. Please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.